The morning sun did not rise gently over Dust Creek. It bled across the horizon, staining the scrubland a bruised purple before searing the dusty main street with unforgiving heat. Elara Vance stood before the heavy oak desk of Judge Blackwood, her spine steel-stiff beneath the stifling black crepe of her mourning dress. It had been exactly 21 days since they lowered Sheriff Martin Vance into the hard earth, and the town's sympathy had evaporated like rain on hot slate. "Mrs. Vance," Judge Blackwood's voice was like dry parchment crumbling. "The territorial statutes are quite specific. A woman of childbearing age cannot hold a ranch of that magnitude without a male guardian. The deed reverts to the county unless you remarry within the month." Elara's gloved hand strangled the strap of her reticule. "Judge, I ran that ranch alongside Martin for 10 years. I know the herd, the books, and the seasons better than any man in this territory. And yet, you are not a man?" The judge didn't even look up from his ledger. "The council has concerns. We need that land productive to support the coming railway line, not falling into ruin while a widow plays rancher. We have taken the liberty of finding a solution." The heavy double doors behind her groaned open. The silence that swept through the courthouse was immediate and suffocating. It wasn't the respectful silence offered to a judge. It was the primal quiet of prey sensing a predator. Elara turned. Silas Thorne stood in the doorway. He was a mountain of a man, blocking out the harsh light from the street. Everyone in Dust Creek knew him, though few had heard him speak more than 2 words at a time. He had been Martin's hired hand for the last year, a drifter with a past no one asked about, because the look in his eyes suggested the answer would be terrifying. He wore canvas trousers that had seen better decades, and a leather vest that creaked with his breathing. A jagged white scar carved a path from his left temple down to his jawline, vanishing into the collar of his shirt. "Mr. Thorne possesses a 40-acre parcel adjoining your southern fence," the judge droned on. "Combined, it secures the valley. He has agreed to the terms." Elara looked at Silas. His eyes were the color of a storm cloud, flat and unreadable. He held his battered hat in hands that were too large, too scarred, and too steady. "I don't need a husband," Elara said, her voice trembling with a rage she could barely contain. "And certainly not a hired gun." "You need a husband by sunrise tomorrow." Reverend Cole stepped out from the shadows, his face pinched with false piety. "It is for your protection, Elara. People talk. They wonder why the sheriff was alone the night the Copperhead gang found him. A marriage stops the whispers." The whispers. The accusation hung in the stale air. "Mr. Thorne," Elara said, turning fully to the giant man, "do you have a voice, or did you sell that along with your dignity?" Silas shifted his weight. The floorboards groaned. When he spoke, it sounded like gravel grinding together. "Outside." It wasn't a request. Elara followed him out into the blinding noon glare, ignoring the eyes peeling back curtains in every storefront. They stopped by the water trough at the livery. "You don't want this," Elara stated. "No." "Then why?" Silas looked toward the horizon, squinting against the glare. "I owed Martin. He gave me a job when I was starving and didn't ask where the bullet holes in my coat came from. He made me promise." "Promise what?" "To watch over you. Said the Copperheads were getting bold. Said if he didn't come back, I was to make sure you didn't lose the land." Elara felt a fresh wave of grief crash over her. Martin had known. He had known he was riding to his death. "My conditions are absolute," she said, her voice hardening. "This is a business arrangement. You work the land, I run the house and the books. You stay in the bunkhouse or the spare room. There will be no expectations." Silas looked at her then, really looked at her, with an intensity that made her breath hitch. "I don't touch what isn't mine, Mrs. Vance. And I don't force where I'm not wanted." "Good. Then we marry at dawn." She walked away before he could see the tears of humiliation stinging her eyes. Behind her, she felt his gaze, heavy, protective, and terrifyingly silent. The wedding was a sterile affair. No flowers, no music, just the scratch of a pen and the hollow echo of vows neither meant. By noon, Elara Vance was Elara Thorne. The ride back to the ranch was 5 miles of silence. When they arrived, the house felt different, invaded. Silas moved his few belongings into Martin's old study. He moved through the house like a ghost, making no sound despite his size, a habit born of a life where noise meant death. 2 weeks bled into 3. The town turned its back on them completely. The widow and the wolf, they called them. Ilara focused on her work, scrubbing floors until her knuckles were raw, desperate to ignore the stranger living in her home. It was a Tuesday when the tension finally snapped. Ilara was in the mercantile in town, buying flour. Bull Park, a man with more stomach than sense, cornered her by the dry goods. "Shameful," Bull sneered, leaning too close. "Martin ain't cold yet, and you're playing house with his stray dog. Makes a man wonder if you and the drifter planned it." "Step aside, Bull," Ilara warned. "Maybe you need a real man to show you." The air in the store changed. It went cold. Silas had entered. He didn't shout. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply walked toward them with a terrifying, fluid grace. "You bothering my wife, Bull?" "I'm just talking truth, Thorn. We all know what you are." Bull shoved Silas. It happened in a blur. Bull threw a haymaker. Silas sidestepped it with a millimeter to spare. He caught Bull's arm, twisted, and drove him face first into the seized counter. A jar of pickled eggs shattered. Bull howled. "You touch her again," Silas whispered, loud enough for the whole store to hear, "and I will bury you where no one will ever find you." He offered his arm to Ilara. "Ready, Mrs. Thorne?" They walked out, leaving Bull groaning in a pool of vinegar and brine. On the ride home, Ilara looked at his hands. "You heard him. He'll live. They hate you. They fear me. It's safer for you that way." "Is it true?" she asked, the question she had been too afraid to voice. "What they say about you?" Silas didn't look at her. "I've killed men, Ilara. Some for money, some for survival. I'm not a good man, but I am the man who is currently keeping you alive." That night she sat on the porch and watched him chop wood. He worked with a rhythmic violence, shirtless in the cooling evening. His back was a tapestry of scars, burns, lash marks, bullet puckers. It was a map of a hell she couldn't imagine. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt a strange, aching curiosity. The storm hit 4 days later. It was a prairie thrasher, turning the sky green and the air thick enough to chew. They were out checking the northern fence line when the clouds burst. "We have to get to the canyon overhang," Silas roared over the wind. They galloped for shelter, but the mud was treacherous. Ilara's mare stumbled, her front leg catching in a badger hole. The horse went down screaming. Ilara was thrown clear, slamming into the wet earth with a sickening crunch in her ankle. Pain, white and hot, blinded her. Through the haze, she felt strong arms lifting her. Silas. He didn't check the horse. He knew a broken leg when he heard it. He scooped Ilara up, shielding her body with his own as hail began to pelt them like buckshot. He carried her a mile to a small line shack Martin had built years ago. He kicked the door open and laid her on the rough bunk. "My horse," she gasped. "I'll handle it. Stay." He vanished into the storm. A single gunshot echoed moments later, swallowed by the thunder. Ilara sobbed, not just for the horse, but for the cruelty of the world. When Silas returned, he was soaked to the bone. He built a fire in the small potbelly stove, his movements efficient. He knelt before her. "I need to take the boot off. This is going to hurt." He cut the leather away with a knife that was razor sharp. His hands, so lethal in the mercantile, were incredibly gentle now. He felt the bone, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sprained bad, but not broken. He tore strips from his own shirt to bind it. They were trapped there as the storm raged through the night. The small shack warmed up, smelling of wet wool and sage. "Tell me," Ilara said into the darkness, watching the firelight dance on his face. "Tell me about the scars." Silas sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. "Which one?" "The one on your shoulder. Knife fight in Abilene. A man didn't want to pay. His gambling debt." "The burn on your arm?" "Brand. I was a runaway when I was 12. Ilara's heart broke. "And the one on your face?" Silas touched the jagged white line. "That one. That one reminds me why I left the life. A bullet meant for a child. I got in the way. It grazed me. You saved the child?" "I tried. It wasn't enough." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy with shared pain. Ilara slid off the bunk, wincing, and sat beside him on the floor. "You're not a monster, Silas. You don't know me? I know you carried me through hail. I know you defended my honor against Bull Park. I know you kept a promise to a dead man because you have a code." She reached out, her fingers trembling, and traced the scar on his cheek. Silas froze, his breath hitching. He looked at her with a vulnerability that shattered her defenses. "Ilara," he warned, his voice rough. "Don't. I'm tired of being alone, Silas. I'm tired of the ghost of my husband and the judgment of this town. I want something real." He turned his face into her palm. The kiss, when it came, was desperate. It tasted of rain and whiskey and years of loneliness. He was careful with her, terrified of his own strength, but Ilara pulled him closer, needing the weight of him to anchor her to the earth. That night, in a shack surrounded by a tempest, the business arrangement burned to ash, and something far more dangerous took its place. The peace lasted a month. It ended on a Sunday morning with the sound of thunder, though the sky was clear. Ilara was in the kitchen kneading dough when she saw them. 12 riders on the ridge, the Copperhead gang. They wore red bandanas and rode with the arrogance of men who owned the law. "Silas!" she screamed. He was already moving. He kicked the back door open, holding a Winchester rifle and a bandolier of ammunition. "Get down! Get to the cellar!" "No!" Ilara grabbed Martin's old shotgun from above the mantel. "This is my home. I'm not hiding in the dark while you die for it." Silas looked at her, saw the iron in her eyes, and nodded once. "Take the east window. Don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes. They'll try to burn us out." The first shot shattered the parlor window. "Thorn!" A voice boomed from the yard. It was Caleb Rourke, the leader of the Copperheads, a man Silas had once ridden with, years ago. "Come on out, traitor! We just want the woman's deed and the gold Martin Vance stole." "He didn't steal anything!" Ilara shouted, firing a blast of buckshot that took the hat off a rider too close to the porch. The firefight was chaos. Bullets chewed through the wood siding, sending splinters flying like shrapnel. Silas was a machine. He moved from window to window, firing with terrifying precision. Every time his rifle cracked, a man fell. "They're flanking!" Silas yelled. "Back door!" Ilara spun around just as the kitchen door exploded inward. 2 men rushed in. Ilara fired. The kick of the shotgun bruised her shoulder, but the first man went down. The second man lunged, knocking the gun from her hands. He grabbed her by the throat, slamming her against the table. Ilara clawed at his eyes, gasping for air. Suddenly, the man jerked violently. The tip of a Bowie knife protruded from his chest. He slumped to the floor. Silas stood behind him, chest heaving, blood dripping from a graze on his arm. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, pulling her up. "I'm fine. Behind you." Silas spun and fanned the hammer of his revolver. Bang, bang, bang. 3 more attackers in the yard dropped. Silence fell. The remaining Copperheads, seeing half their number dead and their leader, Caleb, clutching a shattered shoulder, turned tail and fled into the dust. Ilara and Silas stood amidst the ruin of their kitchen, breathing hard, the air thick with gunpowder and copper. Silas pulled her into him, burying his face in her hair. His hands were shaking. "I thought, when that man touched you," he whispered. "We won," she said, holding him tight. "We held it." In the aftermath, the town's attitude shifted. You cannot shun a woman who defends her home with a shotgun, nor a man who stands against a dozen outlaws. But the true change came in the form of a small, dirty boy named Leo Finch. He appeared 3 weeks after the siege, clutching a letter. He was skin and bones, with eyes too big for his face. "Is this the Vance place?" he asked, shivering despite the heat. "It is," Ilara said, stepping off the porch. "Who are you, child?" "Sheriff Vance sent me. Well, he told me to come if he didn't come back to the orphanage." Ilara read the letter. It was in Martin's handwriting. "Ilara, if you are reading this, I am gone. This boy, Leo, has no one. He is smart and he is kind. I intended to bring him home next month. Please don't let him fall into the system." Silas watched the boy from the barn shadows. Later that night, the argument was hushed but intense. "We can't raise a child, Ilara," Silas hissed. "Look at me. I'm a killer. Violence follows me. It just blew our windows out. He has nowhere else to go. The orphanage burned down last week. Did you hear? I heard. Suspicious fire. Exactly. Martin wanted this. And I want this. This house is too quiet, Silas. Even with you in it. Leo stayed. At first he was terrified of Silas. He would freeze whenever the big man entered the room. But Silas, for all his roughness, possessed the patience of a predator who no longer wanted to hunt. He didn't force the boy to talk. He simply started fixing the corral fence. On the second day, Leo handed him a nail. On the third, Leo held the hammer. By the second week, Leo was following Silas like a shadow. You hold the reins loose, Silas explained softly, lifting the boy onto a mare. The horse can feel your fear. If you are calm, she is calm. Are you always calm, Mr. Silas? Leo asked. I try to be, even when the bad men come, especially then. Alara watched from the window, tears pricking her eyes as the scarred gunman taught the orphan how to be gentle. They were a family of broken pieces fitting together to make something whole. But the past is a hound that never loses the scent. A letter arrived, nailed to their gatepost with a dagger. It was from Caleb Rourke. Meet me at the old grist mill, midnight, alone. I know who really ordered the hit on Martin Vance. I have the papers. If you want justice, come. If you bring the law, the boy dies. Ilara's hands shook as she read it. It's a trap. Of course it is, Silas said, checking the cylinder of his Colt. But he has information. Martin suspected the mayor and the judge were buying land for the railroad illegally. If Caleb has proof, you can't go alone. I have to. He's watching. Then I'm coming with you. No, you stay with Leo. If I don't come back... Silas stopped, his voice cracking. If I don't come back, you sell the land, take the boy, and go east. Don't look back. Silas, he kissed her, hard and fast. I love you, Ilara. Remember that. He rode out under a moonless sky. The old grist mill was a skeletal ruin by the river. Caleb stood in the center of the rotting floorboards, nursing his bandaged arm. You came, Caleb grinned. Sentimental fool. Where are the papers, Caleb? Silas kept his hand near his holster. Oh, they exist. Judge Blackwood paid me to kill the sheriff, and the mayor paid me to burn the orphanage to clear the land title. Ugly business, civilization. Give me the proof. I have a better offer, Caleb said, stepping back. The judge wants you dead, Silas. He's offering a pardon for me if I bring him your head. But I'm a businessman. You join me again, we kill the judge, take the railroad money, and ride to Mexico. Like the old days? I'm not that man anymore. Aren't you? You killed 5 of my men without blinking. It's in your blood, Thorn. No. Silas drew his gun. Wrong answer. Shadows detached themselves from the walls. 4 men. Caleb had backup. Silas dove behind a millstone as bullets chipped the stone. He was pinned. He fired back, counting his shots. 1, 2. A man fell from the rafters. Give it up, Silas! You can't win this one! Caleb laughed. Suddenly a rifle crack echoed from the ridge above the mill, sharp and distinct. One of Caleb's gunmen spun around, clutching his leg. Crack, another shot. The lantern above Caleb's head shattered, plunging the mill into darkness. What the hell? Caleb screamed. Silas used the confusion. He vaulted the millstone, charging into the dark. He tackled Caleb, feeling the man's ribs crack. They rolled, grappling for the knife at Caleb's belt. She followed you! Caleb hissed, realizing the sniper was Ilara. I'll kill her! Silas roared, a sound of pure fury. He drove his fist into Caleb's face, once, twice. You will never touch my family. He dragged the unconscious outlaw out into the moonlight. On the ridge, Ilara stood, the smoking Winchester in her hand. She had ridden out after him, leaving Leo with the neighbors. She had chosen the living over the dead, but she had refused to let the living die alone. The trial of Judge Blackwood and Mayor Higgins was the scandal of the territory. With Caleb Rourke's confession, extracted by Marshal Graves, a federal officer Ilara had secretly contacted, the corruption crumbled, but the true victory came on a quiet Sunday morning. Ilara, Silas, and Leo walked toward the white clapboard church. The townspeople stood outside, murmuring. As they approached, the crowd parted. Mrs. Miller, the schoolteacher who had once crossed the street to avoid Alara, stepped forward. She looked at Silas, at the scar, at the gun belt he still wore, and then at the hand he rested gently on Leo's shoulder. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," she said clearly. "Leo tells me you helped him with his arithmetic." "He's a smart boy, ma'am," Silas rumbled. "We would be honored if you would sit with us," Mrs. Miller said, gesturing to the front pew. Silas looked at Alara. She squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. They walked up the steps, the boots of a gunman echoing on the holy floorboards, not as an invader, but as a protector. That night, Leo fell asleep on the rug in front of the fire. Silas picked him up, carrying him to bed with infinite care. When he returned to the parlor, Alara was waiting. "We did it," she whispered. "We're not done," Silas said, pulling her into his lap. "Fences need mending, calves need branding, and I believe I owe my wife a honeymoon." "I don't need a honeymoon," Alara smiled, tracing the line of his jaw. "I have my home, I have my son, and I have the man who came out of the storm and learned how to love." Outside, the wind howled across the vast open prairie, but inside, the fire burned steady and warm, and the shadows held no fear. Wow, what a journey for Alara and Silas. From a marriage of convenience to a love that fought off an entire gang. I really hope you enjoyed this reimagined Wild West romance. It's amazing how love can bloom in the harshest of places, isn't it? If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell notification so you never miss another epic tale from the frontier.